John, I'm ready when you are.
Ready on the right, ready on the left.
Good evening. I'd like to call this regularly scheduled meeting of the Marquette Township Board to order for Tuesday, January 6, 2015. Would all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk, retiree roll call, please.
Trustee Pompo is excused this evening. Trustee LaRue.
Here.
Trustee Durant. Here. Trustee Trescott.
Here.
Clerk retiree is here, and Treasurer Johnson.
Here.
And Supervisor Limata.
Here.
Staff President is Manager Gerard and Superintendent Kirk Page. And committee members here are John Marks from Zoning Board of Appeals, Dave Wiegand, Mike Springer from Planning and Recreation, Roads and Planning, and Glenn Johnson is here from the Iron Ore Heritage Trail.
Thank you. The next item on your agenda is approval of the consent agenda. As you know, the consent agenda includes those items that typically do not require immediate board action. This evening's includes the approval of the prior meeting minutes of December 16th and the special meeting minutes of December 22nd. Also received committee and other reports, the budget amendment number 2014-14, fire department officers meeting draft minutes from December 1st, fire department draft minutes from December 8th, road committee draft special meeting minutes of November 13th, the draft minutes of December 2nd, and the agenda for the special meeting on January 6th. Market Area Wastewater Treatment Facility Advisory Board minutes from November 20th. Also included are the Iron Ore Heritage Recreation Authority reports, including the December 21st, 2014 update to member municipalities, profit and loss statement January through November of 2014, balance sheet as of November 30th of 2014, general ledger for same period, 2015 meeting schedule, and a wish list for future years. We also have this evening bills payable in the amount of $292,965.54 and financial statements of November 2014, as well as a treasurer's report of November 2014. Are there any items on this consent agenda that any board member wishes to remove for further discussion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. The next item on your agenda is approval of the remainder of the agenda. Are there any items that board members would wish to correct or add on the remainder of the agenda?
Make a motion, we approve the agenda.
So, support.
We have motion and support to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. The agenda is approved. This evening, under privileged comment, we are privileged to have with us Mr. Glenn Johnson, Marquette Township resident, and he is our representative to the Iron Ore Heritage Recreation Authority. I asked Glenn to come in, and I know not everybody on the board has had the opportunity to meet Glenn, at least not in his current capacity as our representative for the Iron Ore Heritage Rec Authority, and asked him to just come in and provide us a brief update to kind of kick off 2015, allow the board members to ask any questions that they may have for Mr. Johnson while he's here. And Glenn, with that, if you'd approach the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Usually I have to bring this down. It's perfect. I've been on the board for the Iron Ore Heritage Trail for just over a year. I replaced Lynn, who I'll never be able to replace.
Thanks.
All the fine work that she did. But I'm here just to give you a quick update on the trail. Over the past year within the township, we've installed some kiosks in the township on the trail. Some directional signage, hopefully you've noticed. And also, the Marquette Rotary Club has signed up to take care of a portion of the trail within the township. So they'll go on the trail 2 times a year and clean it up for us. So they took over a portion of that in Marquette Township. We're going to be looking for other service organizations and different organizations to help out throughout the trail. 48 miles. One thing that I'm really excited to report on is that we were recently awarded a $10,000 grant from the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs. And if you've been on the trail, if you go past Northwoods Road, you'll notice there's a trestle that goes over. And all kinds of pellets have been falling and they get on the trail. Well, with this grant, what we're going to do is come up with some type of wall, retaining wall, or art sculpture, something to put there that'll stop those pellets from coming on the trail. So we were awarded this grant, and that's what we're going to use that for. So it's kind of cool. So we're excited about that. Carol Fulsher remains the administrator of the trail, and she eats and sleeps the trail. She is so dedicated and wonderful to work with. So much of the maintenance continues to be done by the board members, using their time and talents all on their own. Jim Thomas, Don Britton, Al Reynolds, Carol herself, Don Hoffman, Dottie LaJoy, Gary Johnson, Larry Bassone, and Jeremy Pickens. But I'll tell you that Jim and Don and Al, they're always on the trail constantly, using a lot of their own equipment, things like that. So it's an awesome group to work with. So over the next year, we look forward to filling up the kiosks in the township with stories about the township, including dairies and farms, German and Dutch immigrants. So we're working on writing those that we'll put into the kiosks in the township along the trail. We'll also be removing the ballards, those yellow posts you see on the trail. We found it very difficult to remove those with all the different events we're having on the trail. Pretty much that's Jim and Al and Don going out and pulling those things for every event that's happening on the trail. So we're going to pull those out and we're going to replace them with some nice gates that'll be much easier to open when we have different various events. So we've also received some signage grant from the DNR that will allow us to add even some more signage in the township. So some of the events that have taken place, we've had the Marquette Marathon on the trail with over 1,000 runners. That marathon is a qualifier for the Boston Marathon. So we've had quite a few people there, big brothers and big sisters. They have a 5 and 10K run that we've done. So it's being used more and more. Looking into one of those bike races in the winter with the fat tires. I think in February there's going to be one of those. So, going really well. So with that, does anybody have any questions?
Let's open it up. I don't know, I think probably most of you know who Glenn is, but for anyone of you who don't, any ideas about the Iron Ore Heritage Trail, anything you want to share or pick his brain at, now's a good time to do it. Nothing?
And if anybody has any questions along the way, you can reach out to me.
I think it's awesome that you guys got that grant, Glenn. I think that's really cool to keep those pellets off the trail. And yeah, I've been over there many times, and I get the need for it, but I like the idea that you went after a grant that allows you to put some kind of artistic twist on, instead of just having a roof that steers pellets away. It's about putting some kind of art project together and entertaining that concept, because the whole idea of that recreation trail is being as natural as it is, and you know, for 48 miles and where it cuts through, I hope everyone has had an opportunity to go through it, because to me it's just incredible. I think it's just, we're so lucky to have that type of recreational asset in our community, and on behalf of the board, I'd just like to say thank you for stepping up when we were in need. And you know, Lynn had her dance card overfull for quite a while, and it took a while for us to find somebody that would be able to fill those shoes. And from what I hear, you've done an admirable job. And on behalf of the board, I just say hats off and thank you for helping make Marquette Township a better place to live, work, and play.
Oh, well, thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that. It's been a joy. Like I said, it's a great group of people to work with. And I really think that trail is a crown jewel in the area. You can see all kinds of wildlife. If you can get somebody to drive you and drop you off with your bike up in Nagani, you can be in Marquette in 20 minutes and pedal 3 or 4 times, because it's all downhill. It's just an awesome trail. And I think it's just going to get better.
So if there's ever anything that we can do from the, you know, don't feel like you have to wait for me to reach out to you. If you want to come before the board, you let me know. First and third Tuesdays of every month, we'd always find a slot for you on our agenda.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Glenn. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Those members of the public wishing to address this board may do so at this time. Going once, going twice, it's gone. We'll move to board member comment. Members of the board wishing to say something may do so now. Lynn, start with you.
I don't have any reports because nobody's met, but I understand that let's see. I got a notice today from the American Hotel Association that they are pursuing and encouraging businesses, especially like mine, of course, to contact representatives, in which case I got a hold of Benishek today and dropped a note. And this does affect the township too, because what they're trying to push is going back to the 40-hour work week for benefits. And one of the actions that Obamacare changed, or the Affordable Care Act, is to say that benefits kick in from the health insurance standpoint at 30 hours, and that's considered full-time. So for especially small businesses, but it does affect big businesses too. That's a big burden, and we've talked about it at this level too, and what effect that can have. So if anybody's bored and they don't know what to do and they would like to contact Dr. Benishek, it would be a good thing for him to hear that businesses don't need more strain. They need to be able to consider their full-time people full-time, and 30 hours should still be considered part-time in my opinion. So just a little bit of different information for you.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks.
Diana?
Nothing this time.
None at this time, no.
Peter?
Just a small note, the ice rink is up and running. In our Township Focus magazine, on page 22 is an article about what I'd like to see put into the orientation for the board members, because it hits it right on the head, what we've been saying and talking and discussing. It's just prints out exactly what it is. If you haven't had a chance to read it, because it really spells out how we should be handling it, and I think we can save about half the time on our budgets and that if we do it the way you're expected to do. So I think that's a good article. That's all.
Thanks, Pete. That Pete is always stealing my thunder. Yeah, the ice rink has finally got some ice in it, and we're real excited. After the last time we met, we talked about moving forward with getting the ice rink attendant, and since that time, Manager Gerard has hired a young fella to be our ice rink attendant, and he was over there with Chad. He's learned some of the things. I saw Chad kind of walking through him with not only getting the snow out of there, but opening up the hydrants and how to flood it and get light coats on there. And it was 2 days later, I went over there, and there was about 12 guys up there playing hockey. So it was kind of cool to see. And what that does mean is that as a community, we get through these first couple of weeks, and of course, Dave Wiegand has been working hard on getting us that warming shack up and running soon, and we'll have the lights up there. I keep getting a lot of questions about that. When are the lights coming? As fast as we can humanly possibly get lights up, we will. We hope that it may be as soon as this week, or next. But we're real excited. I think that we've gotten a tremendous response from the folks who've seen it. It's good to get the ice in there and see what we worked so hard to develop over the last few years. So, folks, it is open, and hats off again to Dave Wiegand. Dave, I also wanted to just let you know, and I'll do it while we're here, is that this Gabe Apple, as our rink attendant, would certainly be available to assist you in any way, shape, or form, and his contact information can be supplied to you from Manager Gerard. With that, we'll close board member comment and move to unfinished business. First item on your agenda for unfinished business under 9A is the Emergency Management and Homeland Security Division funding approved. Superintendent Page is here and would be happy to walk anybody through it, but I think when you look at the transmittal that was in your packet, it really comes down to we had several questions about getting reimbursed for the additional expenses from the brutal winter of last year. And this was just to let us know that the application for the deep freeze of winter 2013-14 was approved in the amount of $100,000. And Superintendent Page, if you want to approach the podium and add anything, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add other than, we've discussed this quite a bit. The last communication was actually a press release from the state of Michigan saying that, the grants had been awarded and there was a listing that we were included in. And we got an email along with that press release from the local emergency management people saying, the checks would be forthcoming. So this was like the official letter from the Homeland Security people, and they're still saying
Checks in the mail.
3 to 4 weeks. And as soon as we got this, actually, the emails started flying from other, city managers and other people involved in get these grants. Did anybody get your money yet? So it will be here. Like today would have been the 3rd week from the date of this letter, so it should be soon. People are getting pretty frustrated, but I'm just happy they were getting the money. I mean, I'm sure it will happen.
Any questions for Superintendent Page? Lynn?
I don't know that it's so much for Kirk as maybe Randy. We had a lot of overtime last year. Not all of it was because of the freezing and stuff, but we talked last time. I'm kind of wondering how that money's going to be handled. I'm guessing it's 50-50, probably have to. We have wastewater monies we expended, and the reason I'm asking too is because we ended up, I don't know if, I think it was last meeting, kind of borrowing money or taking money out of one of his projects, and I mentioned that. I said, here we go again. We're taking money out, and that's partly because we've had so much overtime. I realize the fund is down. So how's that money going to go back? Are we going to be able to do one of the projects that we had to take off of his plate?
Yeah, actually, excuse me, when that money comes back in, Lois will be allocating that back to the funds that were affected basically by the draws that went on it. Obviously, we didn't have that much money set aside in overtime funds. It had to come from other places, so those will be reimbursed. And Kirk, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think where we're going to end up on this is it will probably be that whole winter freeze cost us about $3,000 in terms of unreimbursed expenses.
Well, actually, it's more like $70,000, including this particular grant application. There was like 13,000. That was above the 100,000 limit.
Okay.
And then the work that we've done since then, like the Fair Avenue project, for example, which is directly related to, the last winter's freeze, so far has not been reimbursed. One thing about this grant, though, you were talking about overtime. This particular grant did cover overtime. That was directly related to the freeze. Now, obviously, there was other overtime.
Yep.
And the other grants would not have covered the overtime, so that's a good thing.
So do we think we'll be able to have money left for that? I don't remember exactly which project it was. It was on.
Well, this is
I'm
only
pretty sure the last agenda.
$100,000, so, as Randy said, it'll go back to wherever it came from.
Each fund, okay.
Ernie?
There was some discussion a little bit that there may be some other grants or something available coming up. We keep hearing this and that.
Maybe, but, that's coming from politicians, so it's hard to say.
I saw your response, Superintendent Page, to David Nyberg reaching out, I think was from the governor's office, saying, what other, now that these,
Yeah, he wanted to know as soon as we had the check, which of course hasn't happened yet, so I haven't.
right? But he's like, okay, now how much are we
Right,
still
yeah.
in the hole? And I think it's encouraging to see that the governor's office is at least interested in seeing where we're at after.
Yeah, it's hard to say, because the way he was, wording everything was, he seemed to be referring to this Section 19 money quite a
Yep.
bit, which is basically the last of the formal grant that are available. So, and he was implying that maybe there's more, but it was pretty vague.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and basically, the only concern that I have, and I have expressed this concern with the governor's office, is typically those additional funds come out of the governor's discretionary funds, and those are usually tied to community development block grant requirements, which we don't generally comply with. But there is discussion at the legislative level for some continuing, particularly if we, so far this year, it's been pretty chilly. So we may be getting into that freeze cycle again. So some of the legislators are talking about being a little more proactive in terms of addressing some of these things. Now, we did a lot of proactive things prior to last year's freeze and still got caught with some, but we weren't nearly as bad as some of the others.
Right, and this particular fund, I'm not sure, there was X amount of money available, and I'm not sure if all these grants, equaled that amount or not. So there may in fact be, money left in this particular fund, which, as Randy said, was basically the governor's fund. But it was approved by the legislature, for a certain amount of money to be available.
If there's nothing else, thanks, Kirk, and we congratulations on getting the $100,000 grant at least. Appreciate your work on that. Next item on your agenda is 9B, consider the community room rental fee. Previous discussions, we had brought to us from Manager Gerard the fact that we have become very, very popular place for a lot of entities in using our community room for training purposes and whatnot. And we had made the decision when we opened it up last year, because it was new and we wanted to make sure we showed it off, people knew we were there, that anybody who was a government entity that needed some training space, that we would provide it free of charge. After our first year experience, though, Manager Gerard talked about, it should at least be a cost neutral facility, so he has made some recommendations here, and he included the memorandum as well as the current rental sheet. With that, Manager Gerard.
Very simply, not very much on this change, really. As you'll recall, the prior sheet was kind of confusing. There was a lot of different variants in terms of users. And basically, what we wanted to do, or what I proposed to do at the last meeting, was to get to a point where everybody who's using the facility at least covers the expenses for the facility, so we're not going in negative. And when we built our revenue package for the 2014 budget, it was on a revenue neutral basis, but we didn't even come up with that because, as Supervisor Lehman mentioned, the majority of our uses were non-revenue uses, so they didn't pay anything, basically. And, word gets around pretty quickly, particularly in an area like this where there's not a lot of these facilities available. So what I brought back to you today, basically the changes that have occurred are only in Section 1 to this, and essentially what it's done is it's created a flat fee, either $25 if you're a resident or a resident organization in the township, or $35 per hour if you're non-resident from the area. The only difference is, from an organizational standpoint, we did build in, I am proposing to build into organizational use, that the first flat rate basically would be $100, and that would provide up to 4 hours, because basically on these training sessions, if it's a half a day, they have to come in early to set it up and then take it down and put everything away. So that gives them set up and take down time as well as training time in that half day. Beyond that, it would be hourly. So that's what we're proposing, to simplify the process and to make it more consistent across the board, and at least to cover our expenses.
Questions for Manager Gerard?
I think the biggest thing, look, we set something up last year and we found out it didn't quite meet our needs. We set up this, and hopefully a year from now we'll have a better feel as to how this is addressing our problems. If you want to call it problems, it's just our revenue, making sure where we're at, and that. See what kind of comments we get back from our residents.
Yeah, you're right, Treasurer Johnson. You're right. It's, we basically made a projection this year on what our costs were going to be, and we built a fee structure basically to address that. But what we didn't take into consideration was the number of non-revenue type uses that would occur over the course of the year. We were busy. I mean, it was very well used. The intent of having the community center wasn't for a training site primarily. It was for somewhere for the community to come and have events and weddings and showers and birthdays and things such as that, which we had a few of. But we did start running into some conflicts where Some state departments in particular would book it for an entire week, and be here training for that entire week with no contribution to the costs, and those things needed to be addressed. And like you said, we'll be looking at this every year. We'll do an analysis of it and see till we get to that sweet spot where it's just right.
My only concern, I guess, Randy, would be if we do it in that 4-hour block. I think of the times that we've set up things for maybe like Senator Casperson's office, for example, needs to meet, and recommends that we're here, and it's usually less than an hour, and it's a quick one with, there's a dozen people coming in. Are we going to require them to spend $100 and book it for that 4 hours, or are we going to make some?
No, basically the way we treat those is a meeting, because we're generally involved in those as well, and and we wouldn't even charge for that. That's part of our normal daily operation. Working with our legislators, working with the folks that we work with, those are non-revenue.
Okay. Well, you've got it before you. I guess I would entertain a motion one way or the other to either approve or send them back to the drawing board, whichever the board's pleasure is.
I'll move to accept it.
I'll second.
We have motion and all kinds of support. Any other comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes.
Question I have, do we have anyone on the books that have, looking at the rate from this year?
We do. We have already, obviously, we have bookings ahead, and we're going to honor those, for the bookings ahead. But we don't have any large uses for like a week as yet. One day, 2 day, something like that, and we're going to leave those on the books. But anything new that gets scheduled beyond the new structure.
Will they be grandfathered into the old rate then?
Yeah, essentially.
Good question, Ernie. The next item on our agenda is 10A, new business. Consider the Trowbridge Park low-pressure force main project Phase 2. North Country Engineering Contract Amendment Number 2, and North Country Engineering, Inc. invoice number 3025. Superintendent Page, if you'd approach the podium, please. You do have a transmittal in your packet dated December 17th to the Marquette Township Board from Superintendent Page referencing the 3 items that I mentioned. The contract amendment is for additional services provided beyond the scope of work in the original professional services agreement dated May 13th of 2013 for $15,225. A previous amendment was approved for $14,287.50. The current proposed amendment number 2 is requesting an additional $6,750. The current invoice number 3025 is for services provided from August 19th through December 12th. That amount is $6,750. Superintendent Page did recommend approval of the contract amendment payment of the invoice. Superintendent Page.
Well, I covered it pretty well there. Essentially, as you know, there were cost overruns on the project because we expanded the scope of the project. And so as the construction increases, so does the engineering, because it includes inspection, reviewing and recommending change orders and a request, a number of different items. So this will be, as it says, the second contract amendment. And these should be approved separately. Obviously, the first one should be the contract amendment for $67.50, and then the invoice for $67.50.
So you need 2 motions to
Right,
move it
yeah.
forward. Okay. Board member questions for Superintendent Page. Ernie?
I have a question, in going through the actual detail of their bill here, and I'm looking down here on the end of it, if you have it in front of you, pay request 1, 2, 3, and 4, and each one of them, you look at the hours on that, 4 1/4, 375, 4 1/2, 4. I'm going to question the hours they put in to do some of that, because a lot of that stuff is done on site, and they bring it in, and it's just computerized in that, so you're talking about a lot of hours to do some of this and that.
Well, it might be computerized, but it's, it's somebody's office, the contractor's office. It might be computerized, but I don't think it is. It's still, it's manually processed in review. So. And the process is, I don't approve it myself. The engineer has to, because it's basically the engineer's project. He has to review it, first of all, and then he recommends to me, and then I recommend to you for approval.
I just think there's a lot of time there in the
Well-
review and the process that, so 4 hours to do some of that?
Yeah. Well, you know,
I think
yeah.
I don't have a problem paying on it. It may be
Yeah.
a question for them to come back with an answer for it and that too, actually.
I know quite often it's not just, you know, here's a pay request. It's actually there's quite a bit of back and forth. Because it's done through the office. It goes from the contractor to the contractor's office, and back to the contractor, and then to the engineer, and then to me. And a lot of times there's, you know, the office will, you know, a lot of times we'll get more than one version, is what I'm saying here. You know, so sometimes the quantities, you know, might change, because that's another thing. It also includes. It's not just reviewing a piece of paper saying what happened. You know, there has to be basically mutual agreement on the quantities every day. So.
It just kind of jumped out at me when I looked at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I mean, they're all pretty similar. I mean, it's like either 3 to 3.25 hours to 4.5 hours. So, I mean, that's pretty standard. And these rates are relatively low too, you know.
Okay, that's that question answered.
Other questions?
I was gonna ask the same thing. It seemed kinda crazy to me too.
Nothing else? Pete, I entertain a motion for
I'll make a motion that we approve for
the contract amendment.
North Country Engineering for $6,750 for invoice number 3025.
Let's do the contract amendment first, right, Kirk?
Yep.
So let's motion to approve the contract amendment first, and then we'll approve the invoice.
What's okay. Contract amendment number 2 you're talking about?
Right. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll support.
Support.
So we have a motion to approve the contract amendment number 2 and support. Any other comment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Now we entertain a motion, Pete started from the North Country Engineering invoice number 3025 in the amount of $67.50.
Support and Pete's motion for that.
Okay.
There's no other questions about that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And that motion passes. How do we do, Kirk?
Good. I just have one more comment.
Sure.
Regarding Fair Avenue. I've been out of town, so I haven't called a progress meeting, but I have had some correspondence with the contractor. It does look like that phase of the project is gonna come in under budget, actually, by a few $1,000s. So.
It's good news.
That's good news. Yep.
Thank you. Ready?
Are they through with the paving on Fair? Did they get that all completed?
Yeah, that's actually the first thing they tried to do because they started so late.
I know.
The paving was gonna had to be done by Friday. And I think they started like maybe Wednesday or Thursday, you know. So they tried to get the work in that intersection done first, and they got it paved on Friday.
They're doing it in the snow at the end.
Yes. But a deadline's a deadline.
Thanks again, Kirk. Next item on your agenda is 10B. Consider the manager's 2014 goals and objectives. Manager Gerard.
What I put together was a recap, basically, of where we got to in 2014 on the goals and objectives. We did have a couple of projects that were held up by outside influences. One of those is now resolved. It had sent you out an email, basically indicating the transfer of property was taking place, but was probably going to take a little bit longer. So we extended that purchase agreement through January of 2015. My understanding is that it is on track. The paperwork is being completed and being returned. Other than that, I really didn't have any comments to make, unless board members have any questions with regard to it. Say it's a recap of 2014, your fourth quarter report.
Any questions or comments from the board to Manager Gerard on his recap of his 2014 goals? I just made myself a note. What I will do is pull these and save it so that when a performance appraisal time comes around, I'll send out his recap of how he ended up 2014, since his performance appraisal usually goes from September to August.
Correct.
And so we'll
Through
be able
August.
to include that in your conversation about where he was through 2014, and then we'll have him update us again in 2015 before his performance appraisal process. Thanks, Randy. The next item on the agenda is 10C, consider the manager's proposed 2015 goals and objectives. As you know, we asked Manager Gerard, once we had mutually agreed upon what we thought were the most important things for him to work on in 2015, asked him to put together kind of the same format that we've been using for the last couple years in strategies and tactics and timelines that he intends to work on the things that we've, again, mutually agreed upon are the most important things from a goal perspective, trying to look out 12 months out. I went through it, and I thought he had done a pretty decent job. I did mention to him earlier today that the question I was going to have for him has to do with the last goal that he had in there, and it's about the asset management program on developing and implementing the vehicle and mobile equipment maintenance program for all township departments and operations. And what I didn't see in there was any timelines. Most of the other goals had done a pretty good job of breaking it out. And so Ernie had the same question, and I gave Manager Gerard the heads up late this afternoon that would be a question that he would be fielding this evening. So I will throw that right to you right now, Manager Gerard.
And it wasn't something I forgot. Basically, what it amounts to is we're in the process right now of determining what program we're going to be using, and once we make that determination, I'll be able to fill dates in for you in terms of how that's going to be done. It takes coordination with the fire department, coordination with public works, and coordination with general fund departments to have all of the vehicles. We're doing an inventory on it currently, so we have all the vehicles and every piece of movable equipment. And by that I mean things like the Vectors, the Argo, and the fire department, the snow machine, all of the movable equipment, whether it's licensed or not licensed, so we can have it all on the same maintenance schedule. So likely it'll be possibly your next meeting. We'll be able to fill the dates in on that.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on any of the others? Ernie?
I think also going back to number 2, the Mason's Bluff, I had some time frames in there. I don't know if it's possible at this point in time to put anything in there, but I'm looking at that when you talk about 30, 35 additional home sites with a projected revenue of 70K. That's true when they're all up there, but some kind of projecting in the future what we think about happening this year and the following year after that too. So
The key element there that is not in place as yet is who the contractor is going to be that the UP Catholic Credit Union is working with to do the development. Once they get that cemented or identified, we'll be able to identify those timelines.
I think the other one is the cost factor that the township would be looking at that too.
Randy, we do have a rough idea that, there's at least a handful or maybe half a dozen current property owners at Mason's Bluff who have continued to contact the township on a regular basis asking how long before they can begin construction. There were many of them who thought that they would already be living in their homes out there for a couple of years now, and of course due to unforeseen circumstances with the contractor and a variety of other instances, it failed to complete. But there are certainly some pressures with the financial stakeholders now to move forward, and I think it will be, like I said, it's when you look at what our game plan has been for the long term for our water project, and you talk to Superintendent Page, he'll tell you that this is just one more branch in that tree of how we're moving forward. Eventually, long term for the township, this can operate as a standalone system, with the idea that eventually it ties in with everything else down 492 and with the second phase of the well project when that's completed in some future time frame.
No, that's correct. There are several property owners involved, individual property owners that kind of got caught in the vortex basically when the project went off the rails, so to speak, that are anxious to get going. Some of the issues that have to be dealt with there, and it's part of the difficulty that the credit union is having with securing a developer, is that some of the infrastructure that's in the ground has been there for several years now, and it needs to be refreshed. Let me put it that way. The pipes that are in the ground need to be re-inspected. They need to be made sure that the connectivity is still there. So there's some things that need to be done that it would be unusual expenses for a new developer coming in. Several have looked. The credit union is actively trying to get on board. Obviously, they are trying to maximize their return as much as possible. So they're engaged in some negotiations. We're engaged in negotiations with them, and that's what we're waiting for now is to get that third and fourth party that will be involved in it. And we're having fairly regular contacts from several property owners that are anxious to get going on their property, but they really can't do anything until there's some work done there.
Other questions, Lynn?
I've been saying for a few years that we needed to move on this one way or the other, either, close it down or get it going, one or the other, because we've got assets in the ground that need to be dealt with. And while I do agree with partnering, and I think that's important, especially if we have the same interests going forward, whoever that partner is, I just don't want us to lose perspective that we don't want to do this just for the credit union.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
we want to do it for our people and our township and our community, and partnering with them helps both of us. That's different. As long as we don't start making decisions for them, to their benefit. We have to think about our stuff first.
Oh, absolutely. We're actually talking about a public-private partnership because they are the owner at this point. They own the Masons Bluff facility, and they've got their members that are, that's a member-driven organization, so they're getting some pressure from their members as well, to return that investment basically back to them. Mm-hmm. So it would be, I guess, fairly well characterized as a public-private partnership that would be going in on this. I mean, we really don't have a tremendous amount of investment there currently, but it is significant to our development along 492.
Pete?
I think when this whole project started, we did make some commitments to that area to do certain things. But if we're watching a legislation that's going on right now as far as taxes, I think our salvation was going to be residential building, and I think we should get this on the table, finish this off, and look at other areas of residential, because that's where it's going to save us some money. We're going to make money on taxes in residential areas versus taxes on big stores and that. So.
Ready?
On the next one, on the local roads, going through this strategy here, talking about activities on the bond council, that seems to be the first step you have to take, and that usually takes some time to do it.
Yeah, we are involved in that currently, and we'll be chatting about that a little bit as well. Had some discussion with the road committee here just before this meeting. The recent Supreme Court decision not to take our case for review and the big box issue is going to have some impact on that, and it's we have to seriously sit back and take a look at what our revenue stream now is going to be, since you'll remember the Court of Appeals, when the Court of Appeals ruled, they expanded beyond big boxes in their decision. So we're right now trying to calculate what our worst case scenario might be come March when we have Board of Review, and put some numbers to that and determine what that 1.5 mils is actually going to generate potentially now that we don't have the opportunity to go before the Supreme Court.
Anything else on the 2015 goals and objectives being done? Thanks, Randy. Appreciate you putting your tactics together for us. We'll look forward to hearing more about the asset management date lines as you finalize those. And then just for the public's edification, the 5 established goals for 2015 had to do with overseeing completion of a cost of service study that the board had much discussion on in the 2015 budget calculations. And as Randy puts it, the rationale is long overdue. And I think the board's really looking forward to seeing that move forward. the aforementioned Mason's Bluff subdivision on the negotiation towards completing the water project out there to make those viable properties. Also coordinate administration. The board approved the local road rehabilitation plan and how we're going to put that together. And Randy's right, the Supreme Court decision impacts, the roads as well as everything else we do. Develop and implement the vehicle and mobile equipment maintenance program. It's basically an asset management program that we want to make sure that all of our assets are accounted for and taken care of, and on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And he's going to put something together for us on that. Those are the 4 that were chosen by the board, and Randy Gerard as township manager for kind of our hot button issues for 2015 and where he should be focusing at least some of his energies. So appreciate that, Randy. The speaking of one of them, the next item on your agenda is consider the MGT service cost study proposal.
Missed one.
What did I?
Schedule.
Oh, sorry, I skipped D. Consider the May 5th, 2015 regular meeting change due to election. Clerk Vitari.
Yeah, as little as 3 weeks ago when we set the schedule up, there was no elections on the horizon. And then about a week ago, the governor has decided to have a special election this coming May in regards to the sales tax and fundings of roads and such. So we have to change that meeting date, and I'd like the board to either have it on Monday or Wednesday. It's up to their pleasure. I'd prefer probably Monday, but I'll let it up to the board what do they want to do with that.
Anybody have a conflict with Monday, May 4th?
That'll be for the board and the road committee.
Well, Pete, you can have, the road committee can meet, if they would like on that Tuesday, but the board, the problem with the board meeting that night is, of course, I'm not available. Several workers of the election are board members, so we wouldn't have enough to have a board meeting.
I'm pretty sure that we'd probably go the same day, because we got people working for elections.
Oh, okay.
Monday.
Somebody make the motion?
I'll make the motion. We move to Monday, the 4th of May.
We have a motion and a support
From Diana.
for moving the May 5th regular meeting to May 4th to accommodate the election as scheduled. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Now we'll get to the MGT service cost of service study proposal. Manager Gerard.
Very briefly, as Supervisor Lehman mentioned previously, the discussion of how we allocate costs and establish fees for the township has been a subject of discussion for several budget sessions, several budget cycles. I don't want to say sessions, but cycles year to year. Basically, in terms of determining what's appropriate and what's reasonable with regard to how we allocate our internal services costs, how we establish what our fees to residents and businesses are, and those kinds of things. So as a result of that, one of the objectives that the board set for me for 2015 was to deal with that. So I have been in touch with MGT of America. It's a long-standing, and I did put some additional information in your mailboxes and sent it up by email earlier this morning about the company, but they're a long-standing company in Michigan. They've been dealing with these kinds of studies with Marquette County for almost 25 years under a different name. They were assumed by a larger corporation, now MGT. They do these kinds of studies all over the country, cost of service studies, internal service allocation studies, and setting up fee schedules, basically fee for services, on whatever basis you wish to do it. Our traditional basis has been cost neutral for fees, since we're not a profit organization. They do work for profit organizations as well, so they're familiar with setting up fee schedules with cost plus 10 or whatever, but we've been talking with them. They are available, could be here next week to start the project on the 12th. Arrive the evening of the 11th and start on the 12th, be here that week, meeting with department heads, gathering their information, and then to compile the reports and get them back to us within 90 days. They are honoring the original proposal that they had put together for us during the budget process, $27,500. We had proposed at that time to split that 3 ways, basically equally, 1/3 from the general fund, 1/3 from the fire fund, and 1/3 from the public works enterprise funds, since it impacts all of us, to lessen the pain, as it were, in terms of cost. We do have that included in the budget, the 2015 budget. For that process. So I do have the proposal before you this evening, asking for your concurrence and your authorization to go ahead and start the project next week.
Thanks, Randy. And I will just add to for the board's purposes that I did ask Rob Thal, the legal counsel through the Michigan Township Association, to make sure that it was a legal expenditure, especially out of the Public Works and Fire Fund, if we split the cost of this service or this study 3 ways. And the answer is absolutely. In fact, his recommendation was that it should be done that way. So that's, just want to make sure everybody was comfortable with that.
I guess the only other thing that I would add is the individual who will be coming here, Jim Olson, is the same individual that has been working with the county, Marquette County, for the roughly 25 years. He was with the prior company and was assumed by MGT.
Randy, will you explain what departments are going to be looking at so the people, when they listen to this, and they hear it?
This would actually be all township departments and operations would be included in this, and all of the activities that we're involved in would be studied, and a cost would be assessed to it, basically. As a, for instance, our accountant. We have one accountant that does all of the books for all of the operations, so her time would be split among the operations, basically, based upon what she actually does, and then a cost will be allocated to that. So when we do the 2016 budget, we won't be guessing why Public Works gives the general fund $5,000 or why solid waste transfers $12,000 into the general fund. We'll have actual figures that would have been studied, and those should be in place for about 5 years and then be reviewed again. So that's the purpose. Yeah, that's the purpose for doing this, and it avoids a lot of that question and answer about why and is it fair and what is the actual cost of local government.
I think it's long overdue, so.
Ready?
Question I have, going through the 4 items, 4 timeframes, when you got the delivery of the draft user fee study, is that coming to the board for review before it goes back to them and before the final one in that?
It's coming to both, coming to the board and to staff. It would be joint at the same time, so staff would have, department heads would have the ability to question, input, give input, and also the board as a draft.
Same with the indirect cost allocation plan.
All of them.
I'm going through and reading all this. I've seen a lot of this in business, and we had a lot of consultants coming and going all the time in that. So, and the last one, deliver the final user fee study, and $5,000. And I go, wait a minute, you just got a user fee draft. If there's no change, you're charging another $5,000. I can see the traveling coming up here, but that gets to be a little expensive. So, just to seeing if there's no change in it, how justification for the $5,000 in that.
It's fairly rare that the draft doesn't have changes, usually.
That's true, I know that, but
Yeah.
at that rate,
Yeah.
that's the only thing. So.
Yeah, and basically what they do, the draft is just that. It's a rough draft, and when you get the final report back, I've seen these reports before, when you get the final report back, it's a professionally produced final report that it's like a budget, basically. It goes into a lot of detail, gives you a lot of the background of what they found, why they're allocating it the way they're allocating it. So if you get challenged by somebody as to, why do you charge this department this much, you've got all of the data and all the documentation in that formal report.
The last question I have on the splitting up of the cost factor, you got the enterprise funds. Are you talking about the water and wastewater and solid waste and anything else? That's all.
Public Works would have 1/3 of it, and then they would allocate it to their individual segments.
Okay.
Lynn?
That was kind of one of my questions. I was wondering if we could do this 4 ways, because the biggest impact from utilities anyway is water and wastewater. Shouldn't they, because obviously he's going to split it into thirds then.
But they're pretty much governed by ordinance. They each have a separate ordinance that establishes how they're done.
Okay,
Water and
then all the more
wastewater,
reason
water and
to
sewer both.
Make it a split 4 ways instead of 3.
Well, you could, but you also have solid waste and you also have stormwater. See, in the general fund, we're gonna have, all of the general fund budget, as well as township improvements, and all of the others separated out, but those are all lumped under, those are all lumped under general fund. Same thing in Public Works. He's got 4 basically different divisions of Public Works, and he would likely allocate those on a percentage. His 10% might be 4,411, to solid waste and to stormwater, because they're relatively small. But water and wastewater might take, and what we're dealing with there is how much service does water and wastewater get from the general fund to determine what that repayment may be, if any.
Well, and that's kind of the second part of the question is how, and maybe this is premature anyway, but how do they, if it's something that's going to be used for 5 years, are they going to base it on wages and what our costs are now, and then bump them up like every year?
No, actually, what
that
they're
the
going to do is they're
premise?
going to give us a report that should be valuable to us for about 5 years for us to make adjustments based upon what our income, our increases in revenue and, fees that you set, those kinds of things in terms of the water rates by ordinance. We'll have a base to operate from, but we'll know why and how much the water fund, for instance, should be supporting general fund for clerical support and for postage and for things such as that. But that's what it does. It gives you the baseline, and that baseline report should be good for about 5 years with your annual reviews that you do with the budget. It's not saying that they come back every year and update it or tell
Right.
you what to update it. We would then have a document to work with for the next 5 years. They recommend about every 5 years you redo it.
So it's based on 2014 numbers?
It'd be based on
Cost?
2014 numbers projected for 2015, so we'll have it for the 2016 budget process.
And do they make a recommendation as to, like, every year you should increase this by 0.5% or 2%?
They'll give you a
or-
rationale to
Okay.
follow.
So we'll know
But
what
what
to
we'll
do.
have, when they complete this, they'll be completing it based on 2014 year-end.
Okay.
15's budgeted and anticipated. They will give us probably, very possibly, at mid-year, you may want to amend your budget to adopt some of these fee structures or amend some of the fee structures and then build it into your 2016 budget,
Okay.
which will be starting probably in June, July anyway.
I think what you're gonna find is a wealth of information
Mhm.
when you get it,
Yeah.
that it's
It'll-
gonna take us quite a while to digest it and get through it, but it's really about developing that roadmap, because every board struggles with allocating costs of services to it, and, we've been together through 6 budget cycles now as a team, and we still struggle with the concept of, how do we get through this? I'm really glad that we finally got to this point where we said, you know what? We've never had a roadmap. We're like, what is it based on? And we're kind of like, I don't know, some previous board said maybe it should be 15, and then somebody else said, make it 20, and then we eliminated it completely for 5 years, and then, it's just the rationale was always some action that a previous board took. I'd rather that the future boards who sat in these seats were able to at least have this document in their hands that said, what was their rationale for allocating public fire protection for this much, or why is this contribution to the general fund, $4,000 or $12,000? Well, here's why. So is it exact? 5 years from now, if you don't want to update it 5 years from now, you're still going to be a lot better off than we have been for the previous many budget cycles. You're kind of seeing a percentage split of how this thing rolls out, and that's kind of, I think that you could continue to use that for a roadmap. I do think that you should update it every 5 years, because things change, systems expand. I think when those things happen, it puts financial strains on other areas. And certainly, when you look at what we've been doing with the cost of public fire protection until this year, you look at, we added in a well system, and this entire project, and expanded our system so greatly and put so many more people on, and nothing ever changed. We didn't include that into the projections. And here we've had projections going back from 1996 that never really came to light to the board until this past budget cycle, that, hey, there's actually a cost to public fire protection that should be allocated from the money we collect to the water department. I think it'll be an eye-opener, even from just individual, how, are we splitting it right between wastewater and water? We're always like, yeah, half and half. This is gonna answer that question for you. It's not just a half and half, it's gonna be some science behind it. I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah, and a couple of good examples are, with the treasurer, we've got assessor, deputy treasurer, and right now we've got it split 75% to assessing, 25% to treasurer. Well, they'll actually analyze that and come up with, maybe it's only 12.5%, to treasurer certain times of the year. Most of the time it's assessor. And we've got the technician position that's shared between assessing and planning. Right now we've got that budgeted on what we think it is, but we might be taking too much out of planning and not enough out of so that's what this will do. With a small staff like we have, with people wearing multiple hats and multiple brims on that hat that keep spinning depending on what the question is at the moment, gives us an idea basically when we're budgeting where we should be allocating those costs, and should planning really be getting 50% of that, or should they have that available money to do some other planning. So it basically puts us into perspective. As Dennis said, it's basically it's a medical checkup for the way we have our system set up. It's going to give us a diagnosis and some cures.
Other questions? In any, I would entertain a motion to approve the cost of service study with MGT.
So moved.
Support.
Any other comment? Seeing none, all those in, Clerk Rattari?
Would you like the manager to execute the agreement then?
Yeah, that was the only question. Did you want me to go ahead and sign the agreement, or do you want to have the clerk and supervisor sign it?
Pete, you're the motion maker.
Have the manager sign it.
It's fine.
Okay. There's no other questions. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Looking forward to moving it forward, Randy.
We'll be setting up a meeting with all the department leaders on Tuesday to lay out the work plan and to let them know what they need to have produced by the end of the week, and then they'll be going with it.
Fantastic. The next item on your agenda is 10F, Manager's Report. Manager Gerard.
Not a whole lot of additional comments. Dave, if Dave wants to make some comments about the ice rink, but we did, as of December 29th, we put down, really able to put down the first good coat of ice, and it's funny because within about 2 hours of us spreading the water, we had people skating on on the rink, so they were anxious, and it's been, obviously the weather has been conducive ever since then to making ice, and we've got a good base on there now. There's a fair amount of use already. We did acquire two nets, so nets have been placed. The only thing from the rink standpoint that we're looking at right now, obviously, is getting the lights lit, and as soon as we get the lights are there, they are installed. What's not installed is the electrical connection as yet, and we're waiting for a little bit of break in the weather now so we can get that installed. The only other concern that I have, and Trustee LaRue and I were out there the other day, is that I'm a little bit concerned that the barrier fence on the on one end, basically, on the Summit Street end, may need to be extended a little higher, particularly now that we have nets there. Either extend the fencing a little bit higher or put a cap net over top of it to contain any pucks that might be less than accurate. Let me put it that way, headed for the net. So we'll look into doing that, but I think it's pretty well protected right now. We did receive, and I did send a thank you letter to SEMCO. Our local SEMCO representative, Dave McCowan, that we were working with to get the gas line installed, mentioned the project to his district manager, who came and took a look at it and gave us a $1,200 donation towards the cost of the gas being installed. So I thought that was pretty nice. So I did, on behalf of the board, I did send him a thank you letter. You'll see that in your packet. Your next packet will be a copy of it. I wanted to remind everybody that the Christmas tree collection for natural trees, not for artificial, those are actually garbage as opposed to trees. So the collection for natural trees will be on the 6th. The 5th was yesterday, 6 a.m. So this was published so they would know that. The Supreme Court, we did talk a little bit about the impact of the Supreme Court on the big box denial. The way the court phrased this, their order, which was issued on the 23rd, I believe it was, on order of the court, the application for leave to appeal the April 22nd, 2014 judgment of the Court of Appeals is considered and is denied because we are not persuaded that the questions presented should be reviewed by this court. Our concern all along was that the tax tribunal had misapplied the existing law, and that's what we were trying to get before the Supreme Court. The Court of Appeals was not empowered to address that question. The Court of Appeals only addresses the record of the prior hearing. So they don't rule on the law. They rule on whether or not the tax tribunal properly assessed the arguments that were made. The Supreme Court is charged with assessing the law to determine if the law was complied with, and our contention all along has been that the tax tribunal did not follow the tax law in their determination of the Lowe's decision in our case. So that's what we were trying to get to the court, and we're very disheartened that the court didn't feel that it was appropriate, that this wasn't an appropriate question of law for them to address. So the impact is being felt. We're in the process right now of calculating the return of the funds to the taxing entity, the taxed entities. The collection of the prior year's taxes, the 2013 and the 2012, is not us. That's the county treasurer will be recovering those funds and redistributing them. We, however, are responsible for those funds that are collected in 2014 on recovering those and giving them back. I think the position that puts us in at the moment is we have a number of programs and a number of plans and a number of questions that we've put out to the residents that we intended to do in 2015, 2016, and 2017 that was predicated upon those tax revenues coming in. And now that that segment of the business community, and we expect it will expand for the March Board of Review, is not going to be participating as they had promised and as we had expected. So the board is going to be placed in a position now of having to go back and revisit some of the things that we've put on our plate to determine if we're even feasibly going to be able to do them with the revenue stream that's now going to be coming. I think board members will recall that in our previous discussion we were talking with the Supreme Court about the 12 big boxes, but in the interim we had put into abeyance by agreement a number of other businesses that were not big boxes, that were the mid boxes and auto dealerships and multifamily residential and food establishments that now will be impacted by this decision as well. So we're not really sure where we're going to end up. The assessor is currently analyzing that. We are taking a worst case scenario just like we did in the budget, luckily, and looking at what March might bring us when Board of Review concludes and what impact that may have on our 15 tax revenues for the rest of the year.
Questions for Manager Gerard? Lynn?
Not so much a question as I'm trying to figure out how the public can understand this in dollars and cents, because as well as the last article was written after the announcement was made, it looks like a Marquette Township problem if you the
True.
way it's written. So I guess if bear with me, if Marquette Township receives $100,000 in taxes from Walmart and Target and Best Buy and blah, 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 okay? Just to round it off, $100,000. Instead of getting that, now we're going to get like $25,000.
Well, let me put it into a little better perspective. For every $1 million of development in taxable value in the township, we would get $43,000 on a normal day.
Okay.
That's now being cut down to 25% of that. So we will now get $10,000 for every $1 million
That's why I was
for
trying
our
to use
general
that.
operating. The part that you said is absolutely correct. The public does not grasp what the impact of this is because the people that are impacted don't grasp what the impact is going to be. They've got an illusion that they're somehow going to be made whole out of this by other entities, particularly the state. And what they're not recognizing is that the state is also losing here. The state is a loser in this as well. We are the collector. We're the ones, everybody pays all of the money to us, but we don't keep it. We distribute it, and that's why I put this chart in here. The calculation right now, just on the Supreme Court decision, the 12 big boxes that were included in the Supreme Court decision, the impact for 2014 in Marquette County, throughout Marquette County, is $524,500 in taxes that has already been collected that now has to be reimbursed. Of that, Marquette Township has about, we're going to lose about 64,000 of that, maybe a little more than that. So we're one of the smaller beneficiaries of the taxes. Take a look at, the public schools. Well, you can see all of them on there. County operating. County operating is going to have to pay back $70,000 out of the county operating funds. The public schools is going to have to pay back a huge dollar amount.
What about the library?
Yeah, library loses
library.
$12,000.
Yeah,
They have to pay
$12,000 they have to pay. That's just for 2014. They also have to
Trail,
reimburse
2,600.
2013 and 2012. So it's a sizable issue.
Well, that's why I was bringing up what we're talking about is 14, but you have to go back to the previous 2 years, too.
Yeah, 13
No.
and 12.
Those are not the responsibility of the township. Those are the responsibility of county treasurer.
That's correct.
And they have a time frame. Once they get that bill to pay it, otherwise they get interest charged on it.
That's
So
correct.
they don't have a choice of negotiating anything in that.
20 days. So, as a for instance, just looking at, for 2014, the total is $524,475 that county entities have to pay back to folks that have paid taxes in.
Within 20 days.
Well, they have to be billed within 20 days of the order, and then they have to pay it in a certain time frame. For 2013, there's another $542,160. For 2012, there's another $283,500. So add those together, those 3 years. That's what has to come out this year out of these entities' fund balances to go back.
Now, on the 2014 years, the money that's been collected by the Treasury Department that we've already dispersed to these entities, we have to bill these entities to
Correct.
get it back. Those that we have not sent to, we have to recalculate and
Correct.
return it back to them.
That's correct.
So we have to look at what percent we have to keep and what percent has to go back. It's going to
right.
be an interesting.
And most residents will not see the impact of this for probably 2 to 3 years. And that's the part of this that's most difficult to get through to people, is that you're not going to see it immediately. The tax-paying entities, the businesses and the county millages and things such as that have to come out of their fund balances, they'll see it immediately. But the rank and file residents aren't going to see it for 2 to 3 years when they stop providing services. That's when they're going to see it, and then it's too late. So our only solution at this point that still remains is a potential legislative solution. Not exceedingly hopeful for that, given the balance of power in Lansing currently. I don't see much emphasis being given to local government benefit as opposed to business side and core city development.
Ernie?
I think we also have to look at, from the board standpoint, the allocation of services. How are we going to allocate the services in that? That's a big thing in that.
It is.
Looking at police protection, we may say, hey, police protection is for residential only.
Yeah, we've
That's it.
constructed a budget predicated upon an anticipated tax revenue from the entire community, and now there's a large segment of that community that will not be providing that tax revenue.
I think once we get to that point, these entities, or all the entities, should be notified. This is what we're happening. This is the reason why.
They will.
And
Yeah.
if you have any comments, please come to the open board meetings and tell us your concerns on that.
I think, it's all good points, but I think Lynn, you brought up a really valid point that when you read the article in the Mining Journal, the headline made you believe that it was Marquette Township that was suffering. Their subsequent editorial comment that the Mining Journal put in, they did a much better job of explaining that, hey, this really has huge impact, not just for Marquette Township, but Marquette County, Dickinson County. We forget that Brighton Township fought along with us in this thing, but it's one thing to look at what we have to give back, $524,000 this year for all of the taxing entities just on what occurred in Marquette Township. You start multiplying that across the state, but it's what happens moving forward. And there still has to be a legislative fix. It's why I met with Representative Keevala the next day after the Supreme Court decision not to take our case forward, is because if a new big box comes in tomorrow and says, I want to build a store in Marquette Township because it's such a great place and your infrastructure's here and everything's here and you've got this great traffic count out in front of my business, I can't wait to be here. And we take the manuals from the Lansing, from the state of Michigan. They say this is what you have to value this business at. So XYZ big box opens up, we go through the manuals, our assessor says here's the value, here's your taxable and assessed value, and we give it to them. They take it and they say, nonsense, I'm only going to pay 25 to 30% of that because one day I'll close, perhaps, maybe, in the future. But we still have to put up a defense. Now, we're not going to, the cost of an appraisal for us is $10,000 to $15,000 at least per store. Then the cost of filing our opinions or having somebody represent us at the tax tribunal, so you add those up, we have to use their manuals. We're required by law to use their manuals to tell them that their store is worth $10 million. And we know that they're going to tell us, no, it's not. It's not worth $10 million. It's worth 25% of that. It's worth $2.5 or $3 million, and the tax tribunal will agree with us, and they'll file the papers, and they'll go to the tax tribunal, and the tax tribunal will say, we agree. And the next big box comes, and we go through it again, and we say, you're worth $10 million. That's what Lansing tells us. And then these people say, balderdash, and they go to Lansing, and Lansing says, we agree. It's only $2.5 or $3 million value because you might be out of business one day. That's not a sustainable model. We can't build our budget based on that. It's foolish to make our assessors across the state go through this exercise in futility. And so that's what I tried to share with Representative Keevala, is that fix it. I'm not, when the state got challenged by IBM and they were like, holy cow, this is going to cost millions of dollars to the state's coffers. There was legislation pending 2 weeks later, waiting for the governor's signature. Till they figured they were able to, we can block it by doing this, and they were like, oh, thank God. But yet, we've been banging this drum for 3 years, and we got something introduced last year, 2014, that went nowhere. 2013, tried to get it going. 2014, introduced and stays in committee. 2015, and, I'll just be honest with you, I truly believe that Casperson gets it when you talk to him. He thinks it's a big issue. Keevala gets it. He thinks it's a big issue. But the reality of it is, Keevala sat across from the table from me last week and said, not enough representatives in the legislature think it's a big deal because they're not hearing about it from their constituents. And until we can change that and get some kind of tide shift to get more people to write their legislators and say, You're killing us. I told the Mining Journal when I sent my comments for that article that they wrote, I'm like, I think the best front page pictures you could do is have all of these entities line up, have our fire department line up with their $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 check that they're giving back for 2012, 2013, and 2014, just on the 12 big box stores that are currently pending tax tribunal decisions. Have them stand there with that $80,000 check out in front of, pick a big box, handing it, off to the county saying, well, here's our money back, go give it back to these guys. The school will be up there with a check for $750,000, handing it back to these guys because we all want big box stores and we sure love, we're not trying to block business here, but the system is so patently unfair. I should challenge my house. I think everyone should challenge their house. As a chief assessing officer, that might not make sense to hear me say that, But we've got to do something so that the tax tribunal fixes it or Lansing fixes it. Because my house could be vacant. My sister sells real estate in Flint. There's a lot of vacant homes. I'm sure she'll be happy to provide me with a ton of comparables that one day in the future, because remember what we're doing here. Most of you get taxed on tax day. What's standing on that property on December 31st? That's what you're going to pay taxes on. But we have a special exclusion for commercial business, big box stores that say, except for you guys, you only have to pay taxes on some future guess that you might go out of business one day. Well, wow, my house could be vacant one day, just like Flint. And if that's the case, why should I be paying taxes as if it's the way it sits right now? It's unfair. Why do we make special exclusions for these guys? And until enough people in the state of Michigan understand that, we're not going to see a legislative solution. And, you know, I don't know how else to get it. I'm going to do the presentation at the library. We need folks like the Iron Ore Heritage Trail folks to send saying, look at the impact you're having. When the schools will get on board one day, I hope, because they're not there right now. They say Lansing will make us whole. I told Representative Kevala last week, so they're going to send back a check for $750,000 out of their budget. They had $1 million left over in their fund balance. Well, not anymore. They've got $250,000 left because they're going to send back a check. But the superintendent says it doesn't matter because Lansing will make me whole. So I'm like, so Kevala, where are you going to find checks for all these folks across the state of Michigan? Where's that money coming from? Because we're not sending it in anymore. The big box guys aren't paying it. Where's the money coming from? Well, you're all residents. Take a look in the mirror because I think I know where the money's coming from. Unless
Eventually.
we change it.
Well, how does that
Eventually.
impact the tax law that Snyder's trying to put through? He wants to increase taxes so that schools can be made whole. No wonder they're not worried about it. They're
Under the
expecting the money to
under
come
the
from an
auspices of road repairs.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
There.
a shell game.
Well, and, you know, and one of the responses, you know, Jason, you know, your planner, threw it out today and just in general comment. He said, so we changed our zoning to have not anything bigger than 20,000 square feet. We don't have big boxes anymore. We zone them out. Well, that's all well and good, but we're already down to the mini boxes and, you know, I mean, it's
Right.
it's already trickling down to car dealerships, to restaurants,
Multifamily
to
residential.
multifamily residential. The only place that's not so far is single-family residential.
But even for us to base our budgets for the future, what do we base it on? Do we base it on, hey, great, new stores are coming? Do we fight it? Do we do anything? Or do we just automatically say, the state tells us we have to tell you that your store is worth 10 million, and they're saying, well, yeah, because it cost me 12 million to build it here and buy the land, so I don't care if you want to tell me that it's worth 10. By the way, you know as well as I do that Lansing's going to tell you that it's worth 2.5. And I'll be damned if they don't do that. And the system is so broken. I don't know how else to move it forward other than to try grassroots efforts and get more people involved. But it becomes all of us, because eventually, folks, you curtail services, we stop recreational investment. One of the things that makes us so cool here, we sit here and talk about how cool the ice rink is. Iron Ore Heritage Trail, how cool is that? Those are the things that get cut. Those are the non-essential services that disappear when we keep moving forward like this. And that's just, it's unfair to everybody that commercial business is going to get a break. When will the tax tribunal? I guarantee you when I show up next year and say, hey, my house should be valued as if it's a vacant home in Flint, because that could happen one day in Marquette, I don't know. I guarantee you they'll throw me out and tell me that I can't apply that. I'll guarantee you that I won't get that same tax break. So why not? We're asked to suspend belief, not what your highest and best use is, not what was sitting there on tax day, but somewhere. It could be 5 years, could be 10 years, could be 20 years, we don't know, but you might go out of business. The concept is so ludicrous, but yet when you have your representative tell you that there's just not the support in Lansing to move it forward, there's really something broken, there's something wrong. We have to find a way to get more people to reach out across the state. And I mean, we certainly have a lot more awareness than we ever had before, so we've been pounding on this drum for 3 years now, and certainly the counties, Michigan Counties Association, I mean, they are trying to put legislation together. They do have another attorney that was a tax tribunal. In fact, I think he was the Chief Justice of the tax tribunal at one time. He also represents the Michigan Chamber, who is the biggest lobbying group that blocked the legislation from Kevela and Casperson moving forward. He's attempting to write the legislation now that would hopefully appease the chamber and the other big box guys who are fighting us so that it would move forward. But that sounds a little bit like the fox in the hen house to me. Having them write their own legislation and telling us what they will pay, although maybe it's a start, I don't know. Other questions for Manager Gerard on his manager's report? Seeing none, we'll close and move to public comment. Those members of the public wishing to address this board may do so at this time.
Don't all get up at once.
I guess I just want to talk about,
John, your name and address, please.
John Marks, 155 Hidden Springs. The big box store thing. It's my opinion that the lawyers that represented those folks chose to attack townships because townships were more vulnerable and not really positioned to be able to financially argue with them without really dipping in deeply into the little bit of money that they had. That was targeted at townships for a good reason. They could get away with it for a while. It's also my opinion, and this comes from some experience in Lansing, that the Chamber of Commerce has always appealed and played up to, kiss up to, the cities. It's the cities that really keep those people in play and keep some folks employed in Lansing, in the Chamber of Commerce, to represent the city's needs. I think that legislators in Lansing, if we're going to try and get them to be supportive of the arguments that we've got about the injustice that's been caused, our argument should be with those people that it isn't going to be very long before the Golden Mile in Bloomfield, in Birmingham, in Rochester, in Westland, where the old Hudson stores are. They're all over, but there's a good number of them that are in cities. And I think what we should be doing is urging some of our representatives in Lansing is to begin to use the argument that it's not going to be long before those same lawyers, those law firms, are going to start appealing to people that make us look like small players. There's a Golden Mile in Bloomfield that would just could wipe out the Bloomfield city budget overnight if they ever went to this. So I think that it'd be wise for us to give our legislators, our representatives, the argument that that's what they should be talking about. Because I don't think people realize how little attention you get in Lansing when you say, I'm from the UP, and they think we're all in the woods somewhere. You got to give them something that's going to get into their personal life. And I would argue that that's what we should be telling them. Go to the people and tell the story about what's going to happen in Bloomfield, what's going to happen in Birmingham, in Rochester, in Westland, and in Lansing itself. That's where the greatest number of large box stores are. They're in the cities. And that's the argument that we should be using, and I apologize, but I just think that we need to give our legislators a better argument than the one they're using, because they're not going to get any attention paid to them by just talking about it, about how they've caused a hardship in Marquette Township. They don't give a damn about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Marks.
Dave Wigan, 350 Brookton Road. Just to give you the promised update on the ice rink, or the warming house. I was gone last week. Wright Electric was supposed to be in there Monday. The process that has to get the lights working, the process that has to be established is they have to get the service in the warming house. They have to get it inspected. The Board of Light and Power has to come up and hook up power to the service, and then they can wire the lights. They have agreed to do all that out of sequence so that we can get lights in there. They were going to start on Monday, but I'm sure the weather is what's kept them from doing that. So as soon as we get a little break in the weather, I'm sure they'll be out there to do the service, get it inspected, get the power hooked up, and then get the lights hooked up to the timer. And the big thing about hooking the lights up is you can't just hook them up if you're not going to put them on a timer, because they'll be on dusk to dawn. So we need to hold off on hooking them up until we can get them run through our service and get them on the timer. So that's where that's at. I plan to, as soon as it warms up above 0, to go out there and get the doors and windows put in place so we can lock that up out there too.
Thanks, Dave. Anyone else wishing to make public comment? Seeing none, we will close public comment, move to additional comments from board members.
Well, just one comment back on the big boxes and that, and with what our assessor has to go through under the state statutes and that, I got to thinking, I says, why can't we write a letter to the Attorney General and say, we have to go through all these rules and regulations that have been set up by the state to meet what they say, and yet we have to turn around and lose all that. We've lost all this time and effort and money doing all this. What's your solution to all this? Do we just ignore it and go with what the big boxes say, or what? Let's put it back on someone else to make some decisions, that lay it out to them, and that, because why should we spend all our time and effort and money doing all this, and when it's going to be thrown out the door by another group? So if we could put together some letter and put it on someone else's back to come back with it, I don't think we'll get an answer, to be honest with you.
Good point, Ernie. Anyone else? Pete?
I would like to comment on the ice rink and the warming shack over there. I think we sort of remissed on just mentioning some of the residents that helped over there. We're all glad that Dave took a week off. You know, that we thought maybe 2 weeks would have been more. He's a slave driver over there, but you know, we had Curdy Gustafson over there from a resident. We had Jerry Matson here. You had Genshaw, what's his young? Who? Cole Genshaw, he was there. Them were the people up on the roof. Mike Springer and myself, we had to ground because they didn't want our weight up there.
Said our, Mike. You meant the combined.
It wasn't the weight they were concerned with.
No, but it's really, we had a good time. It was remarkable that these people stepped up. You know, when we talked to them and asked, he said, I'll be there. And I'll get someone else to come in. So, you know, and we had fun doing it. Well, we raised a little hell there, but I mean, you know, we hollered at Dave for every time he hollered at us, so. But he was on the roof and we were on the ground, so we got away with it, so. But I do want to make sure that we mention them people and thank them very much for doing it, so.
Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, I was talking to Manager Gerard yesterday about this big box store issue, and I think we're going to have to revisit, in my personal opinion, I think we're going to have to revisit our fee structure for some of these big box stores, because if we're not going to get the taxes from them, we're going to have to, I think, you know, we're going to have to get our dollars some other way, and that might be fees for certain things. So, you know, the cost of service study, I wish it included that also, but it may. So, you know, maybe that's a way of trying to recoup some of the money that we're gonna lose in this whole endeavor, but, you know, I do feel sorry for, I really feel sorry for some of these entities. I mean, they're, and I've, along with, you know, we've been talking about it, I've talked to some of those people from the schools, and not so much the county, but the schools. They don't understand what's gonna go on. They completely don't understand. And when they have to cut a check for over $750,000 in the near future, I mean, I think it's gonna hit home pretty fast. And they're gonna say, well, we didn't know about this, and unfortunately, yes, they did. We've talked to those folks for the last several years about it. And their Supervisor Lemata is completely correct. They think the state's gonna make them whole. Well, when it doesn't happen, what are they gonna do? So that's just my rant on the big box stars.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, Pete, I'm glad that you mentioned all the volunteers, because Lions Field Recreation Area has been packed with volunteers from the day we started a few years back, and from its initial concept with the Lions, you know, former Lions Club, and guys who gave of their time and talent selflessly to make this thing happen, and it just continues that tradition today. And I mean, hats off to all the folks who have helped make it happen. We've received so many fantastic comments about what a cool place that we've developed out there. I think that it's just a testament to this board, to this community, and to the group of volunteers that we have who step up. And anybody who is watching this at home and you've got a little bit of time on your hands, it doesn't take much, and you've got some talents that you'd like to share with us, man, we'd sure love to see you out there and know that you're giving back to a community. You have a lot of fun, and then you come out there anytime and you realize that you had a hand in it, and you see, you know, some of the young folks from our community out there, whether it's playing ball or skating and, you know, doing whatever, and, you know, playing on the playground equipment. It's just a great feeling to know that you had your hand in there, that you helped make your community a better place, a great place to live, work, and play. So many of the folks whose names don't get mentioned, it's just selfless volunteers. The community couldn't be here without them, but we always have room for one more. We appreciate the hardcore group that we have. So hats off to all you folks who did it. And Pete, should we recognize you? I know you've been out there busting it. Mike Springer, you know, I know Dave is a slave driver. And Dave, I just wanted to say I don't recall signing your vacation slip, so I don't know why you weren't there last week. I was there every day to supervise, and I couldn't find you anywhere. If there's no other comments, we'll close board member comments. I'd entertain one last motion this evening.
So moved. to
Support.
adjourn.
We have motion and support to
Oh,
adjourn.
lots of
All those in
support.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.